For 25 years, everyone who saw Frank knew him the same way. Quiet, humble, invisible janitor. He cleaned hallways, collected trash, never had long conversations with anyone, until that night when everything changed. Welcome to Story Factory. Before we begin this powerful story, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. Riverside Apartments was an 8-story, 48-unit-old building in the city center, built in the 1970s, aged over time, but still solid. With its wide corridors, high ceilings, and classic apartment architecture, it was ideal for the city's middle-class families. Frank Morrison, 72 years old, was the janitor of this apartment building. He'd been doing the same job for 25 years. He started every morning at 6 a.m., worked until 10 p.m. His small room in the basement was both his office and home. Organized, clean, minimalist. Frank's appearance also fit a typical janitor. Medium height, slightly hunched shoulders, completely white hair cut short. He always wore the same gray coveralls, cleaning tools in hand, doing his work quietly. Never in a hurry, never making noise. The apartment residents liked Frank, but never really knew him. He'd been there for 25 years, but nobody knew his background. Where he came from, his family, his hobbies. Nothing. Just reliable, quiet janitor Frank. Mrs. Chen lived on the 3rd floor, a retired teacher. Frank is a very good man, but very mysterious, she'd tell her neighbors. In 25 years, we've never had a personal conversation. Mr. Rodriguez, 5th floor, electrician. Frank's work is perfect. Never any complaints, but he's a very quiet man. Sarah Johnson, 7th floor, young nurse. I always see Frank around the building, but nobody ever asks him, "How are you doing, Frank?" It's like he's a piece of furniture. Frank's daily routine worked like clockwork. He'd wake up at 6 a.m., make his coffee, go on his daily inspection tour of the building. Elevator, stairs, hallways, basement, roof. He'd check everything. At 7 a.m., he'd start cleaning. Ground floor, then upper floors. Never rushed, cleaned every corner carefully. Didn't listen to music, didn't talk to anyone, just did his job. At 10 a.m., residents would start leaving for work. Frank knew everyone, said good morning to everyone. Nobody gave long responses. "Good morning, Frank. Have a good day." Afternoons were for maintenance, changing light bulbs, small repairs, yard work. Frank did everything himself. They never called outside contractors, because Frank knew how to do everything. At 6 p.m., second cleaning round. He'd clean areas that got dirty during the day. When residents started coming home, Frank would usually go down to the basement. At 10 p.m., final inspection tour. He'd lock doors, turn off lights, activate the security system, then retreat to his room and prepare for the next day. The same routine for 25 years, never changing. Riverside Apartments was like a small community. 48 units, approximately 120 residents, mostly middle-aged, working families, children, elderly, young people, all together. Frank knew them, but they didn't know Frank. This one-way familiarity had been like this for 25 years. The apartment management was very pleased with Frank. He never caused problems, handled everything, was reliable. His salary was paid on time. Overtime was never requested. There would be conversations about Frank among residents sometimes. Does Frank have family? I don't know, I've never seen any. Always alone. I wonder if he's happy? Who knows? very quiet. But he's a good man, takes care of everything. But these conversations were always superficial. Nobody cared enough to dig deeper. Actually, there were small clues about Frank, but nobody paid attention. His way of moving, for example. Frank never made noise when walking. His steps were very organized, as if he had military training. But nobody noticed this. The thoroughness of his morning inspections, the way he examined every corner, every detail. It wasn't ordinary cleaning, it was like security inspection. But residents just interpreted this as Frankie's very meticulous, his calmness in emergencies. A few times there'd been small problems, burst water pipe, power outage, elevator breakdown. Frank had solved each one very calmly, very organized. But residents thought this was, Frank is experienced. The most important clue was in his room. Nobody had seen it, but Frank's room was different from an ordinary janitor's room. Very organized, very clean, everything in its place. There were a few books on his desk, history books, military strategies, but nobody had seen these. That Tuesday evening the weather was very overcast. Meteorology had issued a severe storm warning. Wind, rain, possibly even hail. Frank was monitoring the weather during his evening inspection tour. He checked that windows were closed, cleaned drainage channels on the roof, tested the generator. Residents were at home watching television. Most hadn't even heard the weather warning. An ordinary storm was coming. It wouldn't be a big problem. But Frank was worried. Not just because of the weather. This building was old. The electrical system was old. Some window frames had aged. Problems could arise in a severe storm. At 9:30 p.m., Frank completed his final inspection. Everything looked normal. He went down to his room but didn't sleep. He continued monitoring the weather. At 10:15 p.m., the storm began. First came the wind, violent, constant, rattling the building's windows. Then the rain started, but not ordinary rain, a violent downpour. Frank was ready in his room, flashlight, radio, spare batteries, first aid kit, not ordinary janitor equipment, more professional. At 10:45 p.m., the first problem started. Mrs. Davis on the 6th floor's window seal broke. Water leakage began. Frank immediately went up, made a temporary repair. At 11:15 p.m., there was a power outage. The entire building went dark. Frank started the generator. Emergency lights came on. At 11:30 p.m., the elevator broke down. There was a problem in the system after the power return. Frank manually extracted the stuck person. While solving these problems, Frank's behavior was different. He wasn't panicking at all, moving very systematically. He identified every problem very quickly, produced solutions. But the biggest problem hadn't come yet. At 11:50 p.m., a fire broke out in the electrical panel on the 2nd floor. The old cable system had been affected by the storm, causing a short circuit. A small fire, but it could grow rapidly. The fire alarm sounded. The entire building rang. Residents started waking up in panic. Children's voices, screaming, running around. Frank transformed at that moment. He was no longer the 72-year-old quiet janitor. His movement style, tone of voice, body language, everything changed. First, he extinguished the fire. Quick intervention with the fire extinguisher prevented the fire from growing. Professional, effective, without any hesitation. Then he opened the intercom system. "Dear residents, the fire is under control. Everyone stay calm. We will implement the evacuation procedure." His tone had completely changed. No longer quiet, timid Frank, but an authoritative, confidence-inspiring leader. Frank activated the emergency plan, but this wasn't just apartment fire procedure. This was military-level organization. He went to every floor, checked every unit. Third floor secure, exit routes open. Fourth floor secure, elderly residents need assistance. Fifth floor secure, families with children priority. He gave instructions to residents. Mrs. Chen, you help Mr. Garcia. He has difficulty walking. Sarah, you're a nurse. Check the elderly couple on the 7th floor. Rodriguez, you're an electrician. Shut down the main panel. Make sure it's safe. Everyone followed Frank's instructions without question, because his tone, movement style, organizational ability. This wasn't the Frank they knew. Under Frank's management, the evacuation operation began. But this wasn't a normal apartment evacuation. This was military-level, professional organization. First, the most vulnerable residents, elderly, children, sick. Then the rest. Separate exit route for each group, separate security check. Frank was everywhere at the same time. Stairs, corridors, exits. He wasn't running, but he was everywhere, coordinating with radio, controlling the situation. Group 1 in safe zone. Group 2 on stairs, no problem. Group 3, ready, evacuating. Residents were in amazement. Was this really Frank they'd known for 25 years? In 20 minutes, 120 people were safely evacuated. No panic, no accidents, no casualties. Frank came out last. He checked the building one more time, locked all doors, provided security until the fire department arrived. When the fire department arrived, they were surprised. The chaos they expected wasn't there. Fire extinguished, all residents in safe zone, waiting in an organized manner, no panic. Firefighter Tom Sullivan approached Frank. Are you in charge of this building? Yes, I'm the janitor. This evacuation, professional level, do you have military training? Frank stopped. He looked at Tom for a long time, then answered simply, used to. Tom understood. He didn't ask more questions. After the fire department finished and left, residents returned to the apartment. But when they looked at Frank, they no longer saw the same man. Mrs. Chen approached. Frank, you were incredible. This organization ... Frank tried to return to his old self. I just did my job, Mrs. Chen. No, Frank, this wasn't just a job. How did you know what to do? Sarah the nurse with professional eye. Frank, you've had military training. This level of operation ordinary people don't know. Rodriguez, the electrician. I've known you for 25 years. But tonight I really met you. Frank listened quietly. He realized he could no longer hide. Residents gathered in the apartment lobby. Everyone surrounded Frank, asking questions. Frank, please tell us, who are you? Frank thought for a long time. The truth he'd hidden for 25 years could no longer be concealed. I'm a retired soldier, he said simply. Which unit? Rodriguez asked. Special Forces, Marines. How long? 30 years. From 1965 to 1995. Sarah's mouth fell open. 30 years, Special Forces. You're a war veteran. Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Gulf War. Frank was counting. Many places, many operations. So why did you never say? Mrs. Chen asked. Because the past should stay in the past. I'm a janitor now, residents insisted. They wanted to know Frank's story. Frank finally began to tell. I joined the Marines in 1965. I was 18 years old. Went to Vietnam. Saw many things. When I came back, I was a different man. Then other operations. Secret missions. Special operations. For 30 years, I served all over the world. I retired in 1995. I was 50 years old. but I couldn't adapt to civilian life. PTSD, sleep problems, socialization difficulties. Then I found this job. Janitorial work. Simple, quiet. Nobody asked questions. It was perfect. Sarah asked, "Did you ever miss it for 25 years? Military life every day, but I found peace here. You became my family. This building became my mission." A lot changed that night at Riverside Apartments. Frank was no longer just a janitor. He was a hero, protector, leader. In the following days, residents started treating Frank differently. They no longer just said, "Good morning, Frank," and passed by. They stopped, chatted. Mrs. Chen brought coffee to Frank every day. Sarah the nurse checked Frank's health. Rodriguez worked with Frank on electrical jobs. Children started calling Frank Mr. Frank. Frank changed, too. He was more open now, more social. For the first time in 25 years, he could act like himself. Apartment management decided to give Frank a raise. But Frank refused. "My salary is sufficient. I already love this place." Instead, Frank was given new authority, security manager. Now he was responsible not just for cleaning, but for the general security of the apartment. Frank accepted this role because he knew that the residents' safety was his real job. He established a new security system, cameras, alarms, emergency plans. But most importantly, he trained the residents. He held security meetings every month, organizing emergency drills. "The apartment is a family," Frank would say. "We have to protect each other." Frank's story spread beyond the apartment. The local newspaper reported, "Secret hero protects apartment for 25 years. But Frank wasn't pleased with this attention. "I'm not a hero. I just did my job. Real heroes stayed in Vietnam. I'm just one of the lucky ones." This humility impressed the residents even more. Frank's story caught the attention of other veterans in the area. A few old soldiers started coming to the apartment. Frank became friends with them, too. They got together on weekends, sharing their memories. "Good thing we found this place," said Bill, an old Navy soldier. "There's someone who understands us." Frank started organizing small veteran gatherings in the apartment lounge. Residents participated too, listening to their stories. These meetings strengthened the apartment spirit. They were no longer just people living side by side, but a real community. Year later, Frank turned 73, but he wasn't thinking about retirement at all. "I have a mission here," he said. "These people trust me." Apartment management offered to give Frank an assistant. Frank accepted, but had a condition. The assistant should be a veteran, too. Let's understand each other. 22-year-old Afghanistan veteran Mike started work. Frank became his mentor. "War ends," Frank told Mike, "but warriors don't end. We find new missions for ourselves." A year later, Frank turned 73, but he wasn't thinking about retirement at all. "I have a mission here," he said. "These people trust me." Apartment management offered to give Frank an assistant. Frank accepted, but had a condition. The assistant should be a veteran, too. Let's understand each other. 22-year-old Afghanistan veteran Mike started work. Frank became his mentor. "War ends," Frank told Mike, "but warriors don't end. We find new missions for ourselves." For 25 years, Frank Morrison was just a janitor. Invisible, quiet, unimportant. But actually, he was that apartment's guardian angel. That night, during the storm, he showed that real heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear coveralls. Sometimes they carry cleaning rags. Sometimes they never speak. But at the critical moment, when lives are in danger, they are there. Because once a hero, always a hero. Frank's story teaches us that the ordinary people we see around us might not be ordinary at all.